Hi, my name is John Schwartzman, ASC. I'm a director of photography, and you're listening to the Go Creative Show.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Consoli. I am a director and owner of BC Media Productions. This is the Go Creative Show, the show dedicated to creative professionals in the video production and filmmaking industries. John Schwartzman is the legendary cinematographer behind the lens of classics like The Rock, Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, and Jurassic World. And he's here today to discuss his amazing career and latest film, The Highwaymen. The Go Creative Show is supported by Rule Boston Camera. Buy, rent, create at rule.com. Hedge.video, the fastest way to back up media. Shutterstock.com. Magnanimous Rentals. And PremiumBeat.com. Premium, royalty-free music and sound. Well, I am so excited. So excited. Why, you ask? Well, I'm going to be at NAB. Yes, and I'm not just going there just for fun and just to walk around the floor, which I definitely will do, but I'm there for a reason, people. I am there because Atomos is having me host and MC their entire week's worth of panels and master classes. Now, I am so excited for this. We've got an incredible lineup of presenters. Listen to this. Philip Bloom, Rodney Charters. We've got Devin Graham, Dave Mays. We've got Elle Schneider, Alistair Chapman, Jeff Berlin. It goes on and on. Now, all you have to do, this stuff is all free. This is free content. So these are people that you get to meet, you get to listen to what they have to say, hear what they've been working on, plus you get to play with all the cool Atomos stuff. So it is something not to miss, and it's happening all week long, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all week long, and we would love to see you guys there. So if you are there, definitely let us know you listen to the show. Come by, meet me, meet them, have a great time. It's all there at the Atomos booth during NAB. Now, we've got a big show for you today. We've got John Schwartzman on the show. This is a guy that I've wanted on the show for a while now because he's one of the legendary cinematographers working today. He did The Rock, Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, Jurassic World. I mean, it's Seabiscuit. It goes on and on. Check out his IMDb. This guy's been doing it for a while, and he's been doing amazing work. Super high level for his career. And we talk about his career. But he's here to talk about his latest film, The Highwaymen. And there's such an interesting story to how that came about. So we talk about the behind the scenes and the cameras and the lenses. You know what we do here at Go Creative Show. But we also talk about John's career because, he's one of those legends. So we dig into that quite a bit. And he gives some helpful tips on how you guys can, hone your craft or get into the industry if you're not in it already. And that's coming up in just a few minutes. But before we get there, I want to talk about Hedge. Hedge is a backup software for filmmakers. It's that simple, and that's kind of the point. You want it to be simple. Hedge allows you to import multiple sources and send it to multiple destinations. So you've got your media cards, like I do. I've got my camera cards. I've got my audio. We have a behind-the-scenes photographer. Everybody's giving me their cards, and most of the time, I'm my own DIT. So I don't have to worry about it. I plug it all into my computer. I open up Hedge. I put all my cards into the sources area. I put my destinations in the destinations area, and I always have two backups because I'm anal that way, and I want to make sure I have got two. And then it's done. I press transfer, and it goes. And the great part is I've got the Connect app for my phone, so I get alerted when the transfer is done, and it's going to be done fast. It's going to be done right, so I don't have to worry when I give my cards back to the camera operators and my audio techs. Even if they wipe the cards clean, I don't need to worry, because I transferred everything with Hedge. So you get peace of mind, you get speed, you get a great experience, all there at hedge.video. Now, if you go to hedge.video/Go Creative Show, and at checkout type in Go Creative Show in the coupon code area, you will get 20% off the full license. How about that? So head over there, hedge.video/Go Creative Show. All right, it's time to move on. Wow, do we have an interview with you, one of the legends in the cinematography industry, John Schwartzman. So I'm here with John Schwartzman. He's the director of photography for The Highwaymen on Netflix and so many others. You guys are going to be blown away with this guy's portfolio, and I'm so happy to have you here, John. Thank you for being on Go Creative Show.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
You have quite an IMDb here. I mean, really, really impressive. And back, many years. I see music videos here for Christina Aguilera, REM, starting there, and then you go into major feature films: Jurassic World, The Founder, Meet the Fockers, Seabiscuit. It goes on and on and on. And now we're talking about your new project, The Highwaymen, which is not even for theatrical release; it's for Netflix. What a change in the industry, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it is for theatrical release, but as you know, Netflix does a limited theatrical release. So it's been actually out in the theaters for 2 weeks. And it even got a slightly wider release today in New York. But obviously that's not Netflix's metric for whether a picture is successful or not. Unlike when you do a movie like Jurassic World, obviously you're looking at the opening weekend box office numbers as a metric for how successful the picture is going to be. Obviously, Netflix has their own way of monetizing. I don't understand it, but I'm very happy that they're producing movies. And let me give you a little backstory on The Highwaymen, which is I did a picture in 2000 with John Lee Hancock. It was his first movie. It was called The Rookie. And I had just finished Pearl Harbor, which was a very large, long, complicated movie with a lot of moving parts. And then I got sent this very beautifully written small baseball movie, and I happen to love baseball. And I said to John Lee, I would love to do it. At the time, it was the same studio that I did Pearl Harbor for, which was Disney. And they said to me, well, we don't think you can do a movie for $12 million. You've just done one for $200 million. And my response to Disney was, I'm a cinematographer. If I can't do a movie for $12 million, then I shouldn't be doing this job. That budget should not be the thing that you look at and say, oh, well, this movie is too cheap for this guy. As cinematographers, I think all of us are attracted to interesting material, and then we'll figure out how to make it work within the time and the money that we have to make it.
Do you see that happening a lot? Like, do cinematographers get pigeonholed into either small budget or big budget, depending on kind of what their last success was?
I think they do. And if you look at my IMDb page, you'll notice that usually after a big movie, I do a much smaller movie. And having said that, obviously when I'm doing a smaller movie, I'm not getting paid my normal salary, but that's fine. I'm doing it because I enjoy cinematography. Certainly, it's really fun to do big movies that make $1 billion. Of
course.
But it's also just fun to do smaller projects that are more personal. And thank God for Netflix, because The Highwaymen was the picture that John Lee Hancock and I were going to do right after The Rookie. So the first iteration of The Highwaymen was Robert Redford and Paul Newman.
Wow.
And, that was a studio picture. And then the studio marketing people stepped in and said, well, boy, if you make this movie for this much money, we don't think we're going to make our money back. And ultimately that's, how movies get greenlit in the studio. It's not just somebody who goes, this is a great script, let's make it. They have meetings with the marketing department and everybody else, and they have to, weigh the cost benefit analysis of whether this is a good financial move. So we tried to make The Highwaymen in like 2002. It didn't happen. Cut to 2007. It's now Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Redford, and we started prepping the movie again. And again, before we could go into production, the studios kind of got cold feet and backed out of it. Cut to, now, by the way, the script hasn't changed. John Lee Hancock, John Fusco, and Scott Frank, 3 great screenwriters, all wrote this script. I think Fusco is credited, but all 3 of those writers put their spin on it. And it's a great script.
And it's been the same through each of these attempts.
It has, and that's the beauty of it, right? So Netflix, which has a different, model for how they monetize, said, we want to make this movie. And the casting, again, became different. It was Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner, which I actually think is the best casting we've had for the movie.
Yeah.
And obviously within the way they run their business model, this was a very good investment for them. So this is how finally the movie got made. And I don't think that the movie would have gotten made without Netflix. Just like I don't know if Seabiscuit, which came off of a best-selling book, we made Seabiscuit in 2001, 2002, and I don't know if that movie would get made today, even though it's a great film based on a great book by Laura Hillenbrand. I just don't know anymore if the studios would spend $75 million, which is what we spent back then, to make that movie. So figure today it'd be $100 million.
Why do you say that?
I don't think in today's world Seabiscuit gets made. It gets made at Netflix, but it doesn't get made at Universal.
Just not enough return, not enough interest.
I think so. I think that the tastes and preferences of the theater-going audience have changed and evolved, and obviously Marvel has reaped the benefits of that to a huge extent. I mean, look, Jurassic World 1 and Jurassic World 2 have done better than Star Wars 7 and 8.
Wow.
So it just goes to show you that, I mean, I think that Lucasfilm is running up against a little bit of maybe the Star Wars, for at least the spin-offs are certainly getting a bit tired, so I'm sure they'll reinvent it, and they've got obviously the opportunity to make lots of stories, but it seems like dinosaurs just don't ever go out of style.
They really don't. Really don't. I mean, the films are great and they're fun. I mean, they're fun to go to. And
so are the Star Wars movies,
course.
But for some reason, Star Wars 8 did not perform to the level that J.J. Abrams' Star Wars 7 did, whereas Jurassic World that I did with Colin did almost $1.7 billion, and then Jurassic World 2, which I didn't shoot, Fallen Kingdom did 1.5. So they were very close to each other in terms of their box office return, which is very good for Universal.
Do you think that has anything to do with the fact that, let's say new audiences that don't know anything about Jurassic Park, don't know anything about Star Wars, there might be an assumption that you would have need to watch all the Star Wars to appreciate the new one. Whereas I think Jurassic World, it's sort of, I think the assumption may be that it's its own movie and you don't need the lineage.
I think that's 100%. I think that, Ben, I think that's exactly it. I think you've nailed it, which is you don't have to have seen Jurassic Park 1, 2, or 3 to enjoy Jurassic World. It is its own thing.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have seen Jurassic World 1 to enjoy Jurassic World 2, although it would help because you're familiar with the characters.
Yeah.
There aren't as many characters in Jurassic World as there are, obviously, in the Star Wars universe, which is, quite extensive.
Talk to me a little bit about the differences between producing or being involved in a project that is for Netflix versus these major movie studios. Is there anything on set that feels different in pre-production? What do you think?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, what I would say is that obviously when you're doing a movie that has a budget of $200 million, you're going to affect the stock price of the corporation. So there's a lot of checking in with the higher ups.
Yeah.
And what I found on a movie like The Highwaymen, which was not an expensive movie, but still was, 30 some odd million dollars, they basically, I didn't hear from them at all, other than, boy, we like the dailies. They completely let the filmmakers alone. So I thought it was a wonderful experience. And the actual experience of telling a story doesn't change, whether you're shooting on 16 millimeter, DSLR, or large format digital like we did on The Highwaymen. That doesn't, those are the tools, but the process of telling the story is irrelevant of really what you're using to capture it. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but at the end of the day, going on to do the Highwaymen for Netflix was no different than doing Jurassic World.
But you were saying a little bit earlier that the creative control was sort of refreshing. Is that something that you don't see as much when the budgets are bigger and it goes through a larger studio?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it depends on the director. Colin Trevorrow. So Jurassic World, lives under the umbrella of Steven Spielberg. So the only person that we had to make sure was happy when we were doing Jurassic World, the reboot, was Steven. And Steven basically provided like a umbrella around Colin, that was only his second movie. So Colin didn't have to answer to any of the studio creatives. The only person that mattered was Steven Spielberg, and Steven's a filmmaker, right? So that was a very unique experience. It was less so on the reboot of The Amazing Spider-Man with Mark Webb, who's also a young, talented director, but there were a lot more cooks in the kitchen on that movie than there was on Jurassic World. And that's not a negative. I'm just saying that was how it was.
There's all these new studios basically popping up. We have Netflix now doing major feature films. Amazon's doing them. Apple just made their big announcement this week. Do you think this is good for the industry overall?
Well, it's good for me in the sense that there's more people and there's more work out there. As everybody says, right now is the golden age of right for writers in television.
Yeah,
because there's so much production. Certainly, I miss the cinema experience. I think it's still the best way to view this stuff. There's no question that it's, I think, to some degree, on the way out, except for the big, large, expensive movies, the event movies. I think that's why I don't think Seabiscuit necessarily would get the funding for a theatrical release through a studio today in the way that it did back in 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
That's just how it's changed. I mean, look, I'm sitting in my house it's a new device from Panavision. It's a 70-inch OLED HDR television that I'm testing for them that has all kinds of different color spaces. High def is obviously Rec 709. This one has built-in Rec 2020 and P3, which is a cinema color space.
Nice.
And I have a very nice home theater system. So, sitting 10 feet from, I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It's stunning. I don't get me wrong. I still love my Pioneer Curo Plasma, which has now been moved to my office. But this television set is quite spectacular. And there's no question that's only going to get better. And, I can stream the Highwaymen in HDR 4K via Netflix.
Yeah.
There are very few 4K screens, in the cinema in the United States. So this world is obviously changing much faster than the theatrical experience, because the theatrical experience is expensive to constantly keeping up with the technology.
And I think people are watching, like, that sounds like a beautiful TV, but in reality, I think a lot of people are putting it on their iPad when they're on a flight or watching it on their phone, especially younger audiences.
I mean, that's the reality. And by the way, that was one of the reasons why we chose. Back in the days of film, there were basically two formats. There was 185 spherical for projection, and there was anamorphic, which used the full Academy aperture for projection. And the difference was when you went to the theater, if it was an anamorphic movie, they put a anamorphic lens on the projector, which unsqueezed the image and gave you a widescreen image. And if it was a flat movie, 185, they put a spherical lens on the projector. Obviously, now everything is projected flat. So, that experience of anamorphic movies in the cinema, now that they're shot digitally, isn't what it was when they were shot on film. And in the case of Jurassic World, we actually came up with a new aspect ratio, which was 2:1. We felt that would be a good split between widescreen and people's devices at home. There'd be a little letterbox, but not a huge one. And because of digital cinema, you can do that. Whereas in the days of projection, we would have had to have made 40,000 masks that go into projectors, and that isn't going to happen. Whereas for your device, it doesn't matter. You can, essentially your device is like garbage disposal. It'll play anything.
So when you're making your films, are you thinking to yourself, I want to make sure I'm doing something that's cross-platform? I know you're talking about that as far as your aspect ratio for Jurassic World, but are there any other considerations being done if you're thinking about the multiple different screens this is on? Or do you basically just say, forget it, I'm going to just make it look good for theatrical and everybody else can figure it out?
Well, the answer to your question is yes and yes, which is obviously you have to care about the other devices. But having said that, this is my 5th movie, I believe, with John Lee Hancock. Up until now, we used to only shoot anamorphic film. And on the Highwaymen, we shot large format digital, but we still were 2:4:1. Now, that was for a couple reasons. One, the Highwaymen is a Western. To me, Highwaymen is The Searchers, right? It's that kind of movie, and it needed that kind of widescreen appeal. The other thing is, it's a lot of guys in cars, and if you look at the shape of a car, it fits nicely into a widescreen aspect ratio. So
it certainly does, yeah.
But and same with horses. That's why we shot Seabiscuit 2:4:0. I mean, you have to look at what is the best way to tell the story. That's first and foremost. And then obviously, you want to make sure that it's going to play well on all the devices. But having said that, I'm not going to go 185 or 16 by 9 because of the iPad and the iPhone if it's the wrong format for a movie. I'm always thinking of the story first.
I want to talk about your relationship with John Lee Hancock, because you just mentioned you had done multiple films with him. It looks like you're pretty much doing all of his films. I mean, Highwaymen, Founders, Saving Mr. Banks, Blindside. I think The Alamo is the only one I don't see on your IMDb, or maybe I'm missing it.
I didn't do The Blind Side. I was doing something else at the time. But yes, John and I generally try to always work together. We have a great working relationship. He certainly, and if you look at my IMDb page, I work with the same directors multiple times. I mean, I'm going to go off and do Jurassic World 3 at the end of the year with Colin. Yeah. That'll be my third movie with Colin out of 4 movies that Colin has directed. His first one was done for $500,000. So I tend to, I put a premium on, maintaining relationships with directors because it gives you a shorthand on the set. So, I mean, I enjoy the process of, especially when it's somebody like John Lee, who's a great writer and just an absolute delight to be with, and he's a great storyteller. Let me put it this way: I think he's a great storyteller.
I'd love you to kind of just talk in general about the relationships between a director and a director of photography. Certainly using your own experience, but what should that relationship be? In a perfect world, what does a director of photography provide to the director in order to make that relationship work?
To me, ultimately, at the end of the day, and by the way, they're all different. So I came up through the world of music videos and commercials. I knew Michael Bay growing up. He and my sister went to school together. I shot his student films at Art Center, which is a Art Center College of Design. It's sort of one of the leading art schools in America. It's right there with Pratt and RISD. I think all the car designers of the world come out of Art Center, and they have a small film program. But the people that come out of there are quite talented, like Tarsem and Michael Bay, and they're unique filmmakers. That people coming out of Art Center are very refined in terms of their understanding of technique and visual style. So shooting for Michael Bay is a different deal than shooting for John Lee Hancock or Paul Feig. Paul comes out more of a comedy writing background and is not very technical. John Lee is not highly technical either, but he's got a very good aesthetic. So it's a different relationship with all of them. At the same time, what you're really trying to do is be as prepared as possible to allow the directors to have as much time on set with the actors to make the scenes better. That's ultimately why we're there, right? So whether it's Michael Bay and I've prepped 20 camera positions ahead of time, or it's Paul Feig and we're going to kind of bring the actors in and rehearse, put the thing on its feet, and then figure out how to shoot it. They're different styles, but we're all trying to achieve the same thing, which is how to be able to not spend time watching me move lights and cables around, but to be able to actually put the camera up and start shooting. It's about you. A movie set is the most expensive cab meter there possibly is. I mean,
that's a good way to put it.
Well, Jurassic World was $1 million a day to shoot.
Unbelievable,
right? So that's $100,000 an hour on a 10-hour day. So if you're spending an hour moving equipment around, that's as much as a shoot day was on the Highwaymen. So it's all relative. But what you're trying to do is maximize your the amount of time in which the actors are in front of the camera on every shoot day. Having said that, they're all different.
Well, it sounds like you put a pretty strong focus on efficiency.
I do. I'm very, very well regarded for my prep and my logistical ability. As somebody said, I should be running FEMA. I've been doing this for a long time, Ben, so I can look at locations and realize, oh, yes, this is a great location, but this could be a problem. One of the issues we had on Highwaymen was shooting in Louisiana in the winter. There was a lot of rain. Now, this movie is supposed to take place in 1934 on a lot of dirt roads. Yeah. Well, when you bring a film company in and it's 15 trucks down a dirt road that's been rained on, you've got mud. So part of the thing that I talked to the locations department about was how are we going to deal with to make this passable? Are we going to lay gravel down? I mean, it's stuff that normally you wouldn't think cinematographers worry about. But I think if you asked all of us, these are the things that we worry about because these are the things that we can't control. You know, if I'm on a set and I'm lighting it, I have 100% control. When I'm outside, I can't control the weather. And I'm hoping that the equipment can get to where it needs to be. There's a director I used to work with, and if we went out location scouting and it was nice weather, he would be depressed all day because in his mind it was never going to be that nice when we came back to shoot it.
Yeah.
It was his thing. I was like, Steve, you don't have to be so upset. He's like, I know it's going to be crappy when we come back to shoot. So, it's all of that stuff. And it's about, at the end of the day, it's about making a good movie. And to me, the best way to make a good movie is for me to be as prepared as possible.
Is that unusual for director of photographies to be involved in all of those elements as well?
I don't know. That's something you could ask other cinematographers. I don't work with other cinematographers, right? It's
Sure.
a lonely job.
Yeah, but there must be some reaction by other people on set that have worked with other cinematographers. Like I would love that. Working with somebody that is paying attention to all of those things and thinking about the efficiency and getting as much done in a day as possible. Those are all really high quality elements to a person that I would really like to have. So I think I'm wondering if you've heard from other people like, wow, you really bring a new element to this that I'm not used to or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, most of the crews that I work with that are not my normal LA crew, which is becoming fewer, that happens less and less now because there's less production here in LA, would say, boy, we've never worked with somebody who is so efficient. We just go, go, go. And that's how I've always worked. And maybe that's why when you were saying I have quite a large IMDb page, I would like to think that's part of what I bring to the dance.
Yeah, you must hear that a lot, especially from, I can see like producers really loving you because they're thinking about those things, like how much money is an hour going to be? I mean, that's really important stuff. I mean, and aside from beautiful cinematography, which is the primary focus in the storytelling, having those other things in the back of your mind is really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, we finished Jurassic World 2 days ahead of schedule. We just finished the last movie that I did 2 days ahead of schedule.
Oh my God, ahead?
We were on schedule for the Highwaymen. For the most part, yes, it's less stress for the producers. There's obviously acts of God that happen. We actually technically didn't go a day over, but we had to call in an insurance day on the Highwaymen because we could not get to our location. It was flooded, right? So that's just one of those things. And Netflix said, we get it. Okay. We'll give you that day. You can pick it up and, at the end of the schedule. So that's what we did. And that was just one of those kind of acts of God where, what are you going to do? Nothing. There's nothing you can do.
Let's talk about Rule Boston Camera. Rule is the place to go to purchase and rent all of your production equipment. That's right. Production is mission critical, right? Think about it. I mean, not to be over dramatic about it, but let's be honest. People pay a lot of money to make sure that shoot day goes off without a hitch. Your career relies on it. And people are spending money on it, and it's an important thing. And when you work with Rule, they've got your back. They've got expert advice and counsel in pre-production, plus the technical guidance you need when you take the equipment out on your shoot. So they're committed to support you from beginning to end. And that is really what you want in a partner when you're renting equipment. Now, of course, they've got a world-class inventory. So they've got cameras and audio and lighting and grip gear, communications, dynamics, yada, yada. They have it all. And they also have a selection of fantastic lenses. These guys have been around for over 35 years, so you can imagine the inventory they have of lenses. But really what it comes down to is them being as committed to your project as you are. And that's what you're going to get at Rule Boston Camera. Now, beyond that, they do so much more. They're also committed to educating our production community. And it's right there on their homepage. You go there, it says buy, rent, learn in 3 big colorful blocks. And if you click on learn, you'll be faced with a calendar of events and links to previously held events where a lot of them you can go and see the entire thing. So things like Learning Labs, they've got demonstrations on how to use equipment and lighting and gear. And it really is amazing the amount of information that you can get from their website. So it's a place to rent, it's a place to buy, but it's also a place to learn, all there at rule.com. Now let's take a moment and talk about Shutterstock.com. Shutterstock has over 14 million royalty-free video clips, and many of them are in 4K. They add about 100,000 clips weekly, which is insane, but it's true. So how do you go about finding what you're looking for? Here's the crazy thing. With all that content on their site, it's actually very easy to find exactly what you're looking for. I mean, it's obviously you can type in the search bar what you're going for, but honestly, my suggestion is to go to the curated collections. So you go to footage, curated collections. I'm doing it right now with you as we speak. And you're faced with a whole bunch of great categories and videos that have been masterfully curated by Shutterstock. So you know you're going to get the best of the best. And that's a good place to start. Because once you find a clip you like, there's obviously associated clips with it, and you can just go down a rabbit hole and spend hours on here finding great clips for your project and also being inspired for upcoming projects. So it's a place that I go to for inspiration just as much as I do for images and video clips. And I think you should too. Check them out, Shutterstock.com. I know you guys will love it. Now, my suggestion is the curated collection. So Shutterstock.com/video, and then get right there to curated collections. Of course, also check out the Shutterstock Select, which is the upper echelon, the best of the best. And of course, you pay a little bit more for it, but wow, the stuff that is there is cinematic and gorgeous. So check that out as well, Shutterstock Select. All right, it's all there at Shutterstock.com. What are the steps that you take during pre-production to kind of get the project started? Now, I know for the Highwaymen, this is kind of a third attempt to make this film. So you probably have gone down those roads a couple times prior, but I'd like to hear that story. What do you normally do?
So, I mean, on the Highwaymen, one of the things that was to our advantage was that Michael Kornblith, and who I've now done 5 or 6 movies with, so there's a shorthand there, he had already scouted a lot of these locations back in 2007. The irony was they really hadn't changed. They were sort of historical neighborhoods outside of New Orleans, and because they were historical, they couldn't be changed. So that was to our advantage. So, look, most of prep is spent in a van, driving from location to location with the script, looking at the location. John Lee, Michael, and I sometimes will act out the scenes together and talk about, well, what do you think? And then I look at it and say to the first assistant director, are we here for a day? Are we here for half a day? Oh, we're only here for half a day. Well, can we be here in the afternoon when the sun is over here? Basically, you've got a certain number of days to make a film, especially if you're on location. The sun moves throughout the day. So again, you're trying to plan your shooting days around where the sunlight's going to be if you're outside. And sometimes you can win that battle and you can say, look, I want to be here in the afternoon. And sometimes you can't. But again, all of that stuff is coming from a place of this is what would be best for the movie. So most of prep is going through the script with the director, talking about how we want to shoot the scene, what's the coverage, based on the coverage, what pieces of equipment do we need to use to achieve it? Are we towing a car? Is the car just driving into frame? All of these are, these reflect on equipment needs and time. Rigging cars takes time. Driving a car into shot takes less time. But obviously, it depends on what the scene is. But most of it is about how to, as we would like to say, stuffing 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, right? Because you never really have enough time or money, or you can always use more. And in prep is when you kind of come up with your battle plan. It's not unlike generals in World War II, banking on the fact that the Germans were going to run out of gas at the Battle of the Bulge. It's that kind of stuff. You try to break it all down so that you've got a good plan that will service the film all the way through production.
What were you using as visual inspiration when you're coming up with the look for the Highwaymen?
Well, John Lee and I both just talked about Westerns, the Searchers. And so there's been a real tendency from young cinematographers now shooting digitally to shoot with very, very shallow depth of field. I think they feel like it helps make the digital sensor look more filmic, right? And you see it a lot. Guys go outside with the Leica primes and they're shooting day exterior at a 2-stop.
Yeah.
Well, to me, in the only reason to do that from my storytelling standpoint would be if I'm looking to do a very extreme focus rack where I want the foreground sharp, and then when I rack to the background, we see that huge shift in focus. But when you walk around outside during the daylight, your eyes act just like a camera lens, right? Your pupil decreases in size, and therefore your depth of field and depth of focus are much greater. It's why when you get older and you drive home at night, the freeway signs don't look as sharp as they did when you were 21, right?
Yeah.
So your eye and think of your retina as a digital sensor, and your eye is the lens. John and I were talking about the Highwaymen, the one thing I said is, John, this is a Western. 70% of it is day exterior. We need to have deep focus on this movie, like we would have had we been in Monument Valley in 1952 shooting The Searchers.
Yeah.
We were trying to carry as much depth as we possibly could, which, by the way, if you were standing on the side of the road, outside of Shreveport where we were for some of the movie, you could basically your eye could see as far as it could see. It wasn't searching for focus. It was so bright out there that you had unlimited depth of field. And I felt like that was something that the movie needed to embrace as well, which you see less and less these days with digital sensors. Having said that, for the Highwaymen, I had Panavision build a special set of lenses that weren't quite as contrasty, that had certain characteristics of older lenses. They were still sharp, but sharpness, or what we view as being sharp, is a combination of both resolution, meaning can the lens resolve line pairs down to whatever, and contrast. And ironically, contrast probably is more important in your eye seeing focus than even resolution, which is, by the way, that's how digital cameras autofocus works. They look for contrast between two things. So what I did on this movie was I had the contrast of the lenses slightly lowered. Now, they're very sharp. If you put them on the projector, you can read line pairs very, very small down to whatever, I can't remember whatever the size was, but simply as sharp as modern lenses. But because they didn't quite have the same contrast, they just felt a little softer.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that, looking through the trailer and seeing stills from the film. It's an interesting blend of having that sharpness that you sort of see in current films, digital films, but also a little bit of softness there. And I wasn't even thinking from a contrast standpoint, but that's exactly what it is. Now that I'm hearing that, looking at it again, that makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, basically, there was a set of lenses that Panavision made back in the 60s. They're called C-series anamorphic lenses. They are becoming fewer and fewer because they get destroyed over time, especially whenever Michael Bay makes a movie. A couple of them always get destroyed and beyond being able to put back together. And also because of the projection where you don't gain anything anymore. What you gain now shooting anamorphic digitally is you gain the idiosyncrasies of anamorphic lenses. You get the kind of anamorphic lens flares. You get certain issues with the astigmatizers moving and things like that, which, obviously people they seem to love. But when you go to project it, you're actually projecting a smaller image. It's only 800 lines high in 240 when you're using an Alexa and you squeeze it down. That's the size of the image when it gets unsqueezed and it's projected flat. In the case of the Highwaymen, we shot with a medium format camera. We shot with the Panavision DXL2, which has a 42 millimeter sensor. So what that gave us was the magnification of an anamorphic lens, but we were able to shoot 240 spherical. The only way to have done 240 spherical in the past was to shoot flat Super 35, but that's using a small amount of your image area. It's essentially just, it's a crop. So your resolution is much lower. We shot Highwaymen in 8K.
That's what I was just going to ask. So now I know obviously the standard for Netflix is 4K, which rules out a whole bunch of cameras. Shooting this at 8K, did you find? Well, I guess what other cameras were you testing for this before you made your decision?
I didn't test any others because the only other camera that would allow us at that time to shoot this way would have been the Alexa 65, but our budget couldn't handle either the rental of that camera or the amount of data that camera produces. So now there's the Sony Venice, which is a full frame sensor. There's the Arri Alexa LF, which is a full frame sensor. But
they just announced the LF Mini yesterday.
Correct, but understand that Jim Gennard came up with a compression algorithm that's a lossless compression that's on the red cameras. Well, the DXL, which is a Panavision camera, has a red sensor, so it still uses the red compression algorithm. Sony Venice uses the red compression algorithm. Arri decided they didn't want to license that algorithm from Jim Gennard. They didn't want to pay him the money. So the Alexa is raw, uncompressed raw. The red is compressed raw, as is the Sony Venice, as is the Sony F65. Now, if you run the images to ILM, they will tell you they can't tell the difference in terms of the compression. But what is noticeable is the amount of data. So the same amount of data that you can record an hour on with the DXL2 at the same image resolution, actually higher resolution than the Alexa 65, is 11 minutes on the Alexa 65. So if, information now is expensive to hang on to. So, if I said to John Lee, I want to shoot the Alexa 65, but our media budget is going to be 5 times that of the DXL, that's a huge hit on a movie that doesn't have a huge budget.
Sure, yeah.
On a movie like Jurassic World, no one really cares, right? That's a line item that's small compared to everything else. You're spending $10 million on a set. Who cares over the course of a movie if you spend $2 million on data storage versus $400,000 on data storage?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about because, you are shooting a ton of stuff. You're not just doing a commercial here, and you got to make that decision. I didn't know I knew there was a difference between the red compression or the compressed RAW that Red provides and the, I guess, uncompressed RAW that Arri provides, but I didn't know how big of a difference there was in the media sizes. I knew there was a difference, but that's significant.
5 to 1.
Yeah, you got
5 minutes on the DXL2 is 1 minute on the Alexa. And by the way, don't get me wrong, I love those Arri cameras. They're just not right now. I'm very much into shooting medium format. I'll never go back to a 24 millimeter sensor again. I'm always going to be shooting a 42 or 50 millimeter sensor, depending on whether it's the DXL. If it's the Venice, it's a 36 millimeter sensor. But there's so many advantages to these medium format sensors, including that they have more dynamic range because there's just more real estate, and they also have higher ISOs. So, you can shoot in lower light with less additional lighting to supplement.
What about that compared to the 65?
Same. Alexa 65 is a very fast camera, but realize this, the magnification difference is this. What is a 35 millimeter lens in terms of horizontal field of view in regular Super 35 is a 50 millimeter lens in medium format, whether that's the DXL, the Venice, or the Alexa. Now, in a 35 millimeter lens at a 2.8 has the same depth of field as a 50 millimeter lens at a 5.6. So you need more light for these medium format sensors, but because they're faster, you're not really paying a penalty. When we did Jurassic World, we shot that on film, and we shot a third or more of the movie in 65 millimeter film, but I only chose the 65 millimeter film when we were outside during the daylight, when I didn't have to pay the additional costs to light it to 2 stops brighter, right? When you're outside, you're always putting neutral density on the camera anyway because it's so bright outside.
Yeah.
So I could shoot 65 camera outside in Hawaii and not have to go to the producers and say, instead of 5Ks, I need 20Ks to light this set to a 5.6 instead of a 2.8. So I made sure that we didn't suffer any, major financial penalties, but I utilized the 65 millimeter film cameras wherever I could. Now that we have these as digital cameras, I sort of get the best of both worlds.
Well, let's talk about lighting a little bit more as it pertains to the Highwaymen, because like you mentioned, it's essentially a Western. A large majority of it is exterior daytime. What was your lighting approach to the film?
My lighting approach to the Highwaymen was to try to shoot as much of it as I could in backlight or crosslight and do very little supplemental lighting at all. I mean, in close-ups, I would use a white, polystyrene board as a reflector card, or I might use an 8x8 muslin on a frame. But I rarely used any artificial lighting on the Highwaymen at all.
Wow.
I was trying to keep it very naturalistic.
Yeah, you can definitely see that look in the trailer for certain. I haven't seen the full film yet, but in the trailer, it definitely has that look to it. So you must have been able to move relatively fast if you're not setting up tons of lights every minute.
We were able to move relatively fast. The other thing that helped us was having done Seabiscuit, which was a movie in the same time period where everybody was wearing hats. Hats are a great thing because they provide a certain amount of shade over people's faces, so you don't get that very hard top light, dark circles under the eyes. So all you really have to do is come in underneath. Many times when we were in the woods, all I would do was take a white cloth fabric and lay it on the ground outside of where the camera could see, and the sunlight would bounce off that white fabric and just sort of softly fill in their eyes under their hats.
Wow.
Again, it's very hard to blend artificial light with sunlight and make it feel real. God knows we all do it and we do it well. But when you can use natural light and reflect it back, it always feels more of the right quality, for the moment that you're in. So pretty much all of the Highwaymen was done that way.
What were some of the challenges you faced when making the film? Were there any scenes that were particularly difficult or lessons you learned? Go ahead.
It was about mud. It was my camera assistant, Todd Schlope, did The Revenant. Now, The Revenant, most people would say, was the hardest movie ever made in terms of the physical demands on the crew.
Yeah.
Just in how difficult the locations were, rehearsing, and shooting an entire day's work in 12 minutes. And Todd Schlope, who was up in Alberta for months doing The Revenant, said to me that The Highwaymen was probably just as hard, if not harder. And it was because we would go as far as we could until everything got stuck in the mud, and then we would carry it that much farther, or we would have to have 100 sheets of plywood to lay out over the mud to roll the equipment out to where we wanted to film. It was just logistics what were difficult. The script was so good. John Lee knew what he wanted. The actors were fantastic. It was just getting there. Getting there was the hardest part of that movie, and then getting out.
I mean, this is probably a dumb question, but did anybody talk about just not shooting it during the rainy season?
Well, movies get made because of actor availability. This movie really takes place in Texas and should have been shot in Texas. We did go to Texas for 2 days, and you can really see how incredible what that adds to the movie. But no, I mean, at the end of the day, shooting in the fall, and by the way, in Louisiana, it is always the rainy season. We shot Jurassic World, half of it in Louisiana in the summertime, and it rained every day. I mean, it's whether it's going to rain at 3:00 and be 100 degrees, or whether it's going to rain all day and be 30 degrees, Louisiana is on the Gulf. It's a wet state. It's just tough.
Yeah.
But, they offer a huge tax incentive to come and film there. So that's why we were there. Had we shot in Archer City, Texas, which is where really a lot of this movie takes place because it's right near the Oklahoma border, Great Falls, Archer City, you're within 40 minutes of the Oklahoma border, and you're within an hour and a half of Shreveport, which is where Bonnie and Clyde were assassinated. And Dallas, that was really their area. Yeah. I don't think we would have had the same weather issues. It's not quite as wet there, but Texas doesn't offer enough of a tax incentive to make that happen.
Do you have a particular scene that you really, feel is your best work from that film?
It's hard because it's like your children, right? I mean, yeah. Also, I am so close to the movie that I don't see it the same way you did. I will say this. My wife, who sees everything and was a production designer, and it's obviously knows my work very well, said to me she thought it was actually the home that was my best work that she's seen.
Really?
Because it was so reserved, and so because you did, the lighting was so invisible, so what I would say to you is I can't pick one scene out in particular. I just think the whole thing as a piece works really well together.
I want to talk about your relationship with the colorist. How much input did you have in that process?
I always have the same colorist, Stefan Sonnenfeld.
Mm-hmm.
So he and I have known him for, and he's somebody who I work very well with.
Are you heavily involved in the color process for your films?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Can you tell us about the approach that you took for the Highwaymen?
Again, the reality is that I don't do a lot in color timing to relight the movie.
Sure.
So I think it took me 4 days to do the DI on the Highwaymen.
Yeah.
Whereas many people spend, like I know Chivo spent 3 months color timing The Revenant. And although that looks like it's a very naturalistic movie, every single sky has been replaced. Every shot has 40 different power windows on it. I tend to try to do it because I come from a film background, as does Chivo. But in those days, I remember when we didn't have a DI process, right? When you sat in a room and your choices were lighter, darker, warmer, or cooler, and that was it, right? Yeah. Now we can do so many things. I can take the sky down, but leave the actors where they are. I can put a window on somebody's face. But I tend to try not to do that. I try to light it on the day the way it should look. So I'm pretty quick. In other words, when you see the movie cut on the Avid, and I've color corrected the dailies as we go, it's pretty close to how the movie should look when I'm done. That being said, sometimes scenes get moved around and you go, oh, I thought this was going to be a late afternoon scene, but now within the timeline of the movie, they've made this a morning scene. Let's go back and let's cool this off a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, those are things that happen that you don't know about. And I don't think I've ever done a movie where every scene has exactly ended up where I thought it was going to be in the film. So you make, little changes. But I don't sit down with Stefan Sonnenfeld and go, okay, now let's start over.
Yeah, yeah.
I run the movie with him and I'll stop and say, you see that shot? That's the right density for this scene. Let's go back and match everything to that one. And obviously on a movie like The Highwaymen, we were moving very fast. I had a combination of a DIT, a digital imaging technician, and he was also the data wrangler. So he was not only in charge of on set, but he was also doing the Avid dailies for the editor, the pics for the studio, and the LTOs for storage, for archiving. So he was a very busy guy. And what I said to Steve Freebairn, who I've done several pictures with, was, don't worry about doing color per se on set. We'll chase the color with the color temperature of the camera, meaning if it suddenly gets cloudy and the color temperature cools off in the scene, we'll go and change the color temperature on the camera. We'll try to get it as close as we can, but I'm not expecting you to sit here with the DaVinci Resolve open at your station, chasing everything all day long, because you'll never be able to keep up.
Yeah, yeah.
No, so it was basically me doing it on set and paying attention to where's the light, where are we going to go? Hey, John, can we start this way in the morning and we'll finish this way in the afternoon? And with my relationship with John is, he's not going to say no to that because he knows that I'm thinking 12 shots ahead.
Yeah. And that's kind of probably the truest way to do it. I mean, especially when you're outside exteriors, your sun is that's your light source. You got to adjust to it throughout the day.
Right. The only way to make things look good outside is to pick the right location and shoot in the right direction. Otherwise, you're screwed.
It's so true and it's so simple, but it really is true.
That's one of the reasons why it's nice to shoot in the fall and winter, right? We shot Seabiscuit in the fall and winter. We started in the beginning of end of September, and we finished in March. That meant that when I was outside, I never turned a light on because the sun makes a very low arc along the horizon. So you basically, as long as you're shooting in the proper direction, you have low backlight all day, which means that you just need to fill in a little bit with some soft passive bounce sources. And we basically had the same approach on the Highwaymen. Now, we were farther south on the Highwaymen, so in Louisiana in the winter, the sun's a little bit higher, but it's still very low. It's a much gentler sunlight in the winter in New Orleans than it is in the summer, where it's right overhead, very hot, very humid, and pretty unforgiving.
You are listening to the PremiumBeat.com Song of the Week. It's called A Little Bit of Rhythm by Jonathan Boyle. PremiumBeat.com is where to go for all of your royalty-free music and sound effects. If you go to PremiumBeat.com, you get access to their collection of thousands of royalty-free tracks for as low as $59 each. And here's the crazy thing, it's not just the individual track. You get cut downs, you get loop sets, you get stems. So what that really means is you have the ultimate flexibility to make this track that you love fit your project perfectly. And it's all about quality, right? That's what you're going to find at PremiumBeat.com. So head over there, PremiumBeat.com, check out this song of the week, and explore more. And lastly, let's talk about Magnanimous Rentals. Magnanimous! It's so fun to say it that way. It's overboard. I know. But you know what? It's a big deal. They're a big deal, and they deliver on that promise of being a big deal. I don't know if it's a promise, but it's my promise. Here's the thing. You go to magrents.com. It's an equipment rental house, and it's based in Chicago, but they ship anywhere in the country, so you don't have to worry about it. No matter where you are, you're good to go with magrents.com. Now, these guys, when I tell you they're committed to price, they are obsessed with making sure that you are getting the lowest price. They have 3 different types of pricing structures. 3. It's insanity. But here's the thing. When you go to their website and you see a product with a black price, that's their regular price. And it's always going to be competitive. It's always going to be the best. And then on top of that, you're going to see red prices. Now, when you see a price is red, that's called a flash discount. And that is a price that has been cut as much as 50% sometimes, but it's for a limited time. So you have to book those items while the flash discount is in effect. So while the price is red, you got to book it. So those are limited time offers. But then on top of that, they have a new thing in 2019 called dynamic prices. Now, dynamic prices change every day, and they're automatically lowered based on other prices in the marketplace. So you are sure that you're getting the best price available. And even if you, the slimmest chance that you find a lower rate somewhere else out there, they're going to beat it. So these guys are committed beyond anything I've ever seen to price. Now, of course, they've got the inventory, so that's great. So you're always going to find what you're looking for. But when it comes to price, you just can't beat Magnanimous Rentals. So go over there at magrents.com, magrents.com. In our last few minutes, I want to talk about just to offer some advice to the listeners out there that want to get into cinematography or are in it and just want to be better. One of the things I noticed when looking through your IMDb and kind of going through your career leading up to the interview, you've done quite a bit of music videos. You've done commercial work. Do you think commercial and music videos are what cinematographers should have a little bit of experience in, even if they want to eventually be doing film? Are music videos and commercials valuable skills to learn?
Well, I think everything's a valuable skill to learn, and I think that if you're a cinematographer, you always want to be shooting. Look, I came out of film school, and they didn't give me a movie to start with. I did behind-the-scenes interviews with actors on set. You know, I just wanted to be behind the camera. What I will say is this. When I got into shooting music videos in the late 80s, that was a time in which MTV was influencing the way commercials were starting to look. Everybody was attracted to what these young directors and cinematographers were doing on MTV. Yeah. And then we transitioned from music videos into commercials. In the early 90s and late 80s, there was a lot of money to make commercials, and the mandate was go out and shoot us 30 seconds of the coolest stuff we've ever seen, and you have all the money you need to do it. Now, I still do commercials, but what I don't find is the same budgets or the same kind of creative emphasis on let's do something that no one's seen before. I can't remember the last time I really saw a commercial where I said, wow, that's spectacular cinematography. Now it's comedy based, or they don't really care, or it's going to end up not only on TV, but on Instagram and 5 other platforms. And they're just not spending the money. And it doesn't seem as though they care as much about the intrinsic photographic quality. Having said that, it's still look, any day you're working, you're learning. So what I would say to any young cinematographer is do whatever you can to stay busy. That's the job. The other thing I would say is, and I think it's true of my generation, and I may be stereotyping, but when I went to USC Film School in 1982, they gave you a book that was like the TV guide of every movie that was going to be projected that semester at USC. So if you weren't taking a class that afternoon, you could go to the theater and watch an Ozu movie that was for a history crit class on Japanese cinema after World War II, or you could see a Kurosawa film. So I came out of film school with an incredibly extensive knowledge of seeing movies projected. Now, it's okay if you don't see them projected, but when I travel, I have on my computer 10 movies that I watch over and over again. The one movie that is seriously my Bible, because every form of cinematography is expressed in that movie, and you can see it when you watch Blade Runner, is Citizen Kane. I mean, everything is in that movie, from Seven to whatever you want to see. It is literally the single greatest guide to how to become a cinematographer there is. I watched The Godfather because in The Godfather, Gordon Willis chose to shoot all of the coverage on the same lens that he shot The Master on. So if he shot The Master on a 29, he shot the overs and the close-ups on a 29 to keep the field of view the same, right? That was a choice. It's a subconscious thing that probably people don't realize, but it's not like he said, I'm going to shoot The Master on a 29 and I'm going to shoot the coverage on a 75. So that was a choice. I look at Clute, Manhattan, Apocalypse Now. I mean, I have my list of movies that I find inspirational, that when I watch, I still learn something from every day. And I think it's important that young cinematographers go back and look at the great classic movies. All they have to do is go to the Academy website and look at the last 40 movies that have won Best Cinematography and make sure they watch them all. They're all available to see.
It's great advice, and it's good watching. First of all, you're going to be entertained, and you're also going to kind of hone your craft while looking at other people who have honed their craft. And I think that's great advice. John, we ran out of time. I mean, I could talk to you for like 5 days, and I could tell you can do the same. Your passion is just as much at the end of the interview as it is in the beginning, and we certainly appreciate that.
I mean, Ben, and this is to everyone who does what I do, it's a great privilege to get to do this job. I mean, it's an amazing thing to get to be on a film set. I remember I did a movie with Rob Reiner called The Bucket List, which is a fun movie. And Rob Reiner would say to me every day, why aren't you at Video Village? I tend to like to stand next to the camera when we're filming as opposed to behind the monitor. And I turned to Rob Reiner. I said to Rob, if I want to watch Jack Nicholson on TV, I'll buy the DVD of this movie when it's over. But I said, I get to be 6 feet away from the greatest actor of our generation and watch him do his craft. How many people get to come home at night and say they were standing next to Jack Nicholson while he was acting?
I very much appreciate you coming on, and I know The Highwaymen is not even your latest project. You're in the middle of shooting, or did you say you just finished a new project that you're working on now?
I just finished a project called Last Christmas that was shot in London. It takes place during Christmas time of 2016. We shot on the streets of London at night with no additional lighting. So we had to pick our locations very carefully because the City of London does not allow you to run generators or cables during the holiday season. So that was a challenge, but it was a very inspiring challenge. And it stars Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones, who's absolutely just an enchanting young lady. And a very, very funny actress who I think really could be the Meg Ryan of this generation. She's really, even though she's Khaleesi on Game of Thrones, in real life, she's more like Meg Ryan.
Wow. When is that supposed to be released?
Next Christmas.
Wow, look at that. That is fantastic. Where can people go online to learn more about you?
I don't know. Google, I guess.
Oh, do you not have Instagram and all that stuff?
I don't, and I do. I think it's John Schwartzman, DPASC, but it's just a website where I have my show reel and stuff. But just Google me.
There you go. Google him and you'll find all sorts of stuff. But really, the best thing is watch his films. How about that?
Exactly.
That's the best way. John, thank you so much for being on. It really was a pleasure. And I mean, you are an icon in this industry, and I really appreciate you taking time to speak to us and our audience here.
You're very welcome, Ben.
I want to thank John Schwartzman for coming on and talking about his legendary career. So happy to have him on the show. Like, it's an honor. And it's one of those episodes that I'm like, damn, I love doing this Go Creative show. So I hope you guys loved it too. And of course, Highwaymen is awesome. So check that out. You know what else is awesome? Matt Russell. Matt Russell mixes and masters and makes this show sound so good, and he can do the same thing for your work. You can hire him over at gainstructure.com and on Twitter at gainstructure. And while you're on Twitter, tweet us at Go Creative Show. Let us know what you think of the show. Give us a review on iTunes. Engage with us on Facebook. Let us know if you have any guest suggestions. Believe it or not, most of the guests on the show come directly from our listeners saying, hey, I'm interested in this movie. I'm interested in this show. Bring somebody on. So we listen. We'd love to hear what you got to say. And of course, we want you to support our sponsors, Hedge.video, Rule Boston Camera, Magnanimous Rentals, Shutterstock, and Premium Beat. So support those that support us.